All the signs were right in front of my eyes, but I didn't notice them. And when I did, it was too late. Wait for the ending, which will turn everything upside down. The office party ended later than I'd expected. A slow spiral of half-warm hors d'oeuvres, fake laughs, and the smell of cologne that lingered too long after the VP finished another speech about synergy. I stayed for the photos, the toasts, even shook hands with three people I couldn't stand. But at least it looked good. I remember stepping out into the cool Dallas air, that strange weight in my chest. Not from the drinks, but from something quieter, more persistent, like a thread being pulled somewhere behind my ribs. I shook it off and drove to the restaurant to pick up Amy. She stood outside in a pale blue coat, tapping her heel, the way she always did when she was waiting, but didn't want to look like she was waiting. We didn't talk much on the way back. She scrolled through her phone, probably texting one of the girls, maybe her sister. I had both hands on the wheel, eyes on the empty streets, but my mind kept circling back to that moment at the party. Someone had mentioned a real estate boom in Florida, and Amy's eyes lit up in a way they hadn't for weeks. Back at home, she dozed off on the couch, arms tucked under her chin, like she used to in college. I picked her up, carried her to bed. She mumbled something as I laid her down, and that's when it happened. One word, low and sleepy. Chris. Just that. I stood there in the dark a moment longer than I needed to. It wasn't anyone we knew, at least not as far as I remembered. Not a name from her office, not a family friend. The next morning, she was gone before I woke. A meeting, she said, left coffee on the counter with one of those sticky notes. Don't forget you have the insurance thing at 4. I didn't, but I also didn't forget the name. I pulled her jacket from the rack just to check something. Habit, maybe. I'd never looked in her pockets before. But today felt different. Inside, slipped into the lining, was a business card. Cream-colored, sleek, minimal font. Realtor, name, Chris Lanning. And on the back, today, 4:30 p.m. I told myself it was nothing. Probably something to do with the lake cottage she'd been rambling about for months. A place to unplug, she'd said. Maybe even rent it out. That afternoon, I asked casually, "Hey, did you meet with someone today?" She nodded, eyes on her laptop. "Work thing," she said. "Lead from the quarterly call. Boring, honestly." I let it go. For now. But something about the way she said it, the speed of the reply, the avoidance in her eyes, it didn't sit right. That night I lay awake longer than usual, counting the shadows shift across our ceiling like they were keeping track of me too. She slept with her back to me. I stared at the place where our wedding photo used to hang before she said it didn't match the new color scheme. 3 days later, I opened her laptop to print a return label. The last tab was still open. Hotel booking confirmation. Austin. 2 nights. I stared at the screen until the blue cursor blinked me out of my daze. No name. Just her email. No trip on the calendar. I closed it quietly. I didn't ask. I didn't shout. I just memorized the date. The next evening, I watched her change her phone wallpaper from a picture of us at the vineyard to a pale, empty beach. No people, no memories, just sand and an ocean horizon that could have been anywhere. That was when I started the notebook. I didn't even write much, just 3 lines. Hotel, Austin, last Tuesday, realtor card, Chris. The next weekend, she said she was heading to a friend's birthday, a girl named Sierra. But last week it had been Mallory. I asked no questions. I just smiled and made sure I locked the gate behind her. And while the house filled with silence again, I went to the office and printed a second copy of the business card, folded it, slipped it into a manila envelope, marked it, timeline, week 1. I locked it in my desk drawer behind the spare key she didn't know existed. Then I stared at my reflection in the dusty office window and waited for whatever was going to come next. It was a Wednesday when I first noticed the money missing. $400 pulled out of our joint account without a single mention. We'd agreed to hold off on any extra spending until the tax return cleared, something Amy had brought up herself just a week ago while stirring oatmeal in that calm, efficient tone of hers. She said she wanted to be smarter about budgeting. I nodded. I always nodded. But the numbers told another story. I sat at my desk after dinner, pretending to review a sales report while the banking app scrolled open beneath the surface. 4 withdrawals, each at an ATM along the West Corridor, near that new luxury auto plaza. Not just once, but over several days. I zoomed in. There it was again. $400 out, 3 blocks from the Tesla dealership. Another $300 the day before. One more for $220 just last week. The next morning over breakfast, Amy mentioned taking the car in for a weird brake noise. She stirred her coffee with the spoon clinking in a rhythm too neat to be casual. They said it might take a few hours, she added, tossing her keys into her bag. I offered to drive her, but she declined. I'll Uber back, she said. No big deal. I waited exactly 10 minutes after she left. Then I ordered a cab and told the driver to circle the block until we hit the dealership lot. She wasn't there. Not in the service bay, not in the lounge. But just as I was ready to call it a dead lead, I spotted her, across the street, leaning into a parked white Tesla with blacked-out rims. The door opened. A man inside, mid-30s, slim build, gray sport coat. He leaned forward and she kissed him. Quick, familiar, natural, like it wasn't the first time. I didn't move. I just raised my phone, steadied the lens, and took 2 photos. One with the car, one with her face. She didn't see me. They drove off before I could catch the plate. The cab ride home felt longer than it should have. I asked the driver to take the scenic route. I stared out at the blurred buildings and traffic lights until they looked like brushstrokes on a painting I never asked to be a part of. At home, I uploaded the photo to my drive, named the file Lot Sighting 01, and printed a hard copy before locking it in the same drawer with the business card. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't spike. I'd already stepped past the threshold of shock. That night, Amy came home late. Claimed she met up with Sierra again. Hadn't seen her in months, she said, tossing her purse on the couch. I nodded, asked if the brakes got fixed. Yep, just a pad alignment. Quick job. She walked off humming something tuneless, as if she was proud of remembering a lie correctly. Later, when she was asleep, I slipped into the garage and sat in her car. There was something about seeing it parked there, clean and undisturbed, that made the whole thing feel more sinister. I turned on the dome light and opened the glove compartment, a mess of receipts, gum wrappers, and a single envelope. I opened it. Inside, a hotel invoice. 2 nights, suite level, check-in last weekend. The address? A business boutique hotel in town. Not even far away. Close enough for convenience. Distant enough to lie. I took a photo, folded the original, and added it to the dossier. She was building an entirely separate life, and I was starting to see the foundation in fine print and withdrawal slips. Later, I checked her Uber history on the family plan. The rides she claimed didn't match. Where she said she went for drinks with the girls, the data said she'd been dropped off outside the same boutique hotel, 3 different times in 1 month. By now, I'd stopped asking questions. The answers were coming too fast, and none of them came from her lips. They came from numbers, documents, and the technology she'd once relied on me to install for her. I printed a new timeline sheet and added a new heading, Mobility Pattern Deviation. It felt clinical, safe, like a post-mortem of a marriage not yet buried, but already dead in the eyes. Back in bed, I laid beside her and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, content, and I realized with an almost chilling clarity, she wasn't afraid. She didn't suspect a thing. Not yet, and that gave me time. I waited until she left for the gym before touching her laptop again. She rarely shut it down, always left it on sleep, half trusting the blinking light to guard the secrets behind her password. A password I had cracked 3 days earlier when I noticed it was the name of her college mascot followed by her graduation year. Predictable, like the lies she thought she'd disguised. I opened the Chrome settings, dug through the privacy tab, and downloaded her full Google data archive. It took hours. Emails, search histories, calendar syncs, location pings. Then I clicked into the one folder she thought was hidden, the chat backup. Inside was a folder marked Sync Copy, a mirror of her Hangouts and Gmail conversations. The name I'd heard in her sleep appeared again, over and over. Chris. He wasn't just a realtor. He wasn't just a name on a card. He was a whisper in the dark, a shadow in the data trail. I read the thread in silence, Scrolling past flirtation, hotel logistics, a late-night screenshot of a beachfront apartment in Florida. He sent a caption under it. "Ours someday, away from the wait." She replied, "After the mortgage is done. Almost free. Just a few more steps." I stared at the word free longer than anything else. That was the word she used. Not happy, not ours. Free. As if our life together was a cage she was unlocking one document at a time. In another message she wrote, "He won't fight. He never does. He'll sign what I need if I keep it quiet." I didn't flinch, didn't scream. I copied every chat into a folder. Then I checked her Google Drive. That's when I saw the financial document. It was labeled innocently, "Property Plan Updated." But inside was a spreadsheet detailing every bank account, asset, and joint liability under our name, except she'd formatted it as his and mine. There was no ours. I scrolled down and found a subtab, Exit Timeline. It was color-coded, Q2, Divorce Proposal, Q3, New Job Offer, Q4, Co-signed Florida Property. She was plotting the end of us like a quarterly forecast, and I was just now reading the minutes of a meeting I was never invited to. In her browser cache, I found a form from a loan application, forged in my name. The signature didn't match, but it was close enough. She had uploaded fake documents, a modified utility bill with my name on her old apartment address. Then there was the new SIM card. The receipt was in her photo archive, activated under my initials, for banking verifications. I felt cold, not with fear, but with something far heavier, betrayal laced with strategy. I wasn't a man she'd fallen out of love with. I was a stepping stone, a financial tool. She was building her future with stolen brick, and she assumed I'd never look beneath the foundation. That morning I filed for a credit report. There it was, an inquiry for a new loan, with my name and her employer listed as joint financial support. The audacity wasn't in the act. It was in the confidence. She hadn't even tried to hide the employer ID. Just printed it from the home printer 2 weeks ago. The ink was still faint in the margins. At lunch, I locked myself in the study. I started drafting emails to attorneys. Not to act, not yet, just to understand what a financial disentanglement would look like if fraud was part of the equation. The responses came back quickly. 3 of them flagged the situation as high risk for financial abuse. That term stuck with me. Abuse. That's what it was. Clean, silent, executed in the guise of logistics and spreadsheets. But it was still abuse. I didn't talk to her that evening. We ate dinner in the living room, the news playing low in the background. She asked about my day. I told her a client called twice. She nodded. "You're always fixing something," she said, kissing me on the cheek as she walked by. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Later that night, while she showered, I went to the garage and pulled the flash drive from the exterior security system. I hadn't checked it in months. Usually I just let it overwrite itself. But this time I reviewed the last 72 hours. At exactly 2:13 a.m. the previous night, the door opened. There she was, Amy, hair tied back, slippers, quiet. She moved to the cabinet, pulled out a folder, and tucked it under her coat. She didn't know the camera had been adjusted since I installed the new motion sensors. Slightly angled, catching her reflection in the window. She was holding documents. Not hers, not shared. I saw my name at the top of one, inverted in the reflection. It was a power of attorney draft. No signature. Yet. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, the echo of water running from the bathroom fading into the walls. I didn't feel rage. I felt distance. A final kind of stillness, like the moment you realize a house is no longer a home, but a stage that someone forgot to strike. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Her birthday was circled in red, but now I had a more important date to track, the day she stopped pretending. I walked into the real estate agency with a name that wasn't mine and a story polished just enough to pass the receptionist's casual scrutiny. The waiting area smelled like lemon-scented laminate and overconfidence. I wore a blazer I hadn't used since my promotion interview and carried a briefcase that had nothing in it but my lunch, a recorder, and a printed flyer for a Florida property listing I pretended to want. Chris Lanning greeted me like I was the last client of a long day. He was exactly what I expected. Fit, polished, with a handshake that squeezed too long and eyes that measured. He didn't recognize me, of course. He didn't know the man standing in front of him had seen his profile on Amy's laptop, had recorded every chat, and had stared at photos of him kissing a married woman in a Tesla like it was his God-given right. We sat across from each other at a glass conference table. I kept my voice even, my curiosity feigned but specific. I said I was interested in downsizing and investing. I said I wanted peace of mind. He smiled when I used that phrase, maybe because Amy had once used those same words in her chat thread when she described their dream apartment in Miami. The conversation was light at first. Interest rates, ocean access, HOA fees. Then I steered it. What if I want a fresh start? I asked, leaning back. You ever help someone disappear into a better zip code? Chris laughed like I'd told a joke. You'd be surprised how many of my clients say that, he replied. Usually it's after a divorce or a clean break. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider that, while in my pocket the recorder caught every word. Then he said something that made me sit up just a little straighter. She'll be free soon, he said, smiling to himself like he'd slipped up, but liked how it felt. That was enough. I thanked him for his time, promised I'd be in touch, then left the office and drove 3 blocks south before pulling over in a parking garage and transferring the audio file to 3 separate backups. My encrypted cloud drive, a private USB, and a disposable laptop I'd bought that morning. I labeled it Conf04B, implied exit. That evening I created a new anonymous email, burner domain, encrypted, no traceable metadata. I compiled the chat logs, copies of the loan applications, the audio from the office, and a scanned copy of the forged banking form Amy had tucked in her safe. I uploaded them all into a single zip file titled Conflict Client 0928. Then I sent it. Not to her, not to Chris. I sent it to her HR department with a subject line that read, Concerned anonymous source, urgent ethics conflict. I didn't expect a response, but I didn't need one. 2 days later, she walked in through the front door slower than usual, her shoulders dropped, her voice small but practiced. They put me on administrative leave, she said, setting her keys down. Something about a client file. Miscommunication. Stupid mistake. I watched her from the kitchen, feigning surprise. You think it's serious? She shook her head, tried to smile. Number, I'll get it sorted. Just annoying. Bad timing. I said nothing. Just walked to the sink, rinsed my coffee mug, and turned on the faucet a little louder than necessary. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I checked her phone again. The WhatsApp web session was still active on my desktop. The screen blinked once, and a new message appeared. Chris. He suspects something, but hasn't said a word. Still playing nice. Amy replied with a heart emoji. I printed the entire thread, filed it behind the timeline sheets, and marked it. Confidence Phase, Week 3. Then I created a new folder labeled Parallel Risk, Tier 2 Disclosure, and backed it up twice. The next morning, I reached out to a friend I hadn't spoken to in a year, a network analyst who worked in private corporate security. I asked him to run a background scan on Chris Lanning. No reason given. He didn't need one. A favor exchanged once, now returned. I was done waiting for the next lie. I was ready to meet it halfway. That evening, I walked into the garage, opened the wall safe, and reviewed the package I'd started assembling. Photos, receipts, dates, withdrawal logs, text screenshots, audio files, bank activity, loan requests, the 2:13 a.m. footage from the outdoor cam. It was all in order. All except the final piece. I needed her to lie to me one more time, so I waited. The opportunity came the following Friday. Amy said she'd be out late. Mallory's surprise party. I nodded, asked what I should eat. She kissed my forehead and said, anything but pizza again. She left at 6:27 p.m. By 6:41, she was on the interstate, not headed west where Mallory lived, but south toward the city. At 6:58, I refreshed the WhatsApp sync. Chris, still on for 8? Need you to unwind tonight. Amy, already on the road? I missed you. At 7-Eleven, I opened the dossier and stapled the printout to the top page. Then I closed the folder, slid it into the drawer beside the business card, and turned the key. It wasn't about confronting her yet. It was about cataloging the weight of the silence, because she thought I was too quiet to notice. And I was starting to realize how powerful quiet could be when sharpened into focus. The first step was the house. Amy had always assumed that what we owned was shared, and for a long time I believed that too. But assumptions are for people who don't read the fine print. And I had, 3 years ago, when the mortgage refinance papers crossed my desk, and I insisted on keeping my name listed first just in case. That in case had arrived. I filed to initiate a change of ownership structure under emergency financial protection, a clause rarely used, designed for instances of imminent financial fraud or loss. With the help of a lawyer whose retainer had been quietly paid weeks ago, I froze all further transactional rights on the property. The house couldn't be sold, not rented, not borrowed against. And Amy wouldn't know until her next attempt. Next came the funds. I used the emergency power of attorney form she drafted. The one she left half complete in the folder I saw her take at 2:13 a.m. and finished it. Legally. The way it should have been. I notarized it through a remote session and invoked a financial firewall on our joint assets. Every dollar we had access to was swept into a separate account under a provisional lock, flagged for review pending fraud inquiry. That same afternoon, I drove to the tax office and filed an official fraud alert. I brought a USB drive and handed it over without a word. Inside were documents she forged, timestamps, her IP history, and copies of the fake utility bill she submitted for the loan. I didn't ask them to pursue her. I just submitted the facts. That's all I ever did. Meanwhile, I started alerting the institutions tied to our name, the credit union, the family investment office, the insurance underwriters, even our life policy broker. Each received a formal letter, pending internal audit, potential fraud exposure, freeze all co-signed activity. The silence that followed was not absence. It was execution. That weekend, Amy tried to withdraw funds from our card at a boutique in Westlake. The transaction failed. Twice. I got the alert, the same notification protocol I'd set up after spotting the hotel invoice in her glove compartment. She came home that night quieter than usual. I asked if she was okay. She shrugged, said the bank's app was being weird. I just nodded. The next morning, I packed a weekend bag for the kids and told her I was taking them to my sister's in Indiana. Just a short visit, I said. Get them out of the city while you sort things at work. She didn't argue. She just hugged the boys a little too tightly at the door and waved as we backed out of the driveway. I didn't tell her I was installing video surveillance while we were gone. Cameras inside and out, all motion activated, all cloud synced to an account she didn't know existed. Not because I thought she'd destroy anything, but because I needed confirmation. Proof of what she touched when she thought no one was looking. Once in Indiana, I met with a friend who'd worked in legal compliance for over a decade. He helped me coordinate filings across 3 jurisdictions: Texas, Indiana, and Florida. Each one tied to a different element of what Amy had initiated behind my back: banking fraud, identity misuse, and unauthorized financial planning. I wasn't trying to trap her. I was undoing the trap she'd tried to set for me. Before returning, I drafted and sent a formal warning to her parents and her older sister, both of whom had been named as emergency contacts on multiple documents over the years. The letter was cold, not cruel. I included no accusations, just scanned copies of the evidence: the loan application, the altered forms, and a snapshot of her chat with Chris saying, "Almost done. He just needs to sign." No commentary, just ink and silence. The response came within 48 hours. Her father left a voicemail I never listened to. Her sister emailed asking if I was okay. I never replied. I didn't need to. When Amy tried to call the family fund director, the one we had set up for college planning and medical expenses, her request was denied. Her access code had been revoked. I had filed the change weeks ago under a security clause, backed by a notarized affidavit. She never saw it coming. That night she asked if we could talk soon. I said sure. Then I met with a notary and had an official warning served to her workplace address. one that legally prohibited her from managing, altering, or liquidating any property under shared ownership without written consent. I knew she'd receive it before lunch. She'd open it in her office, read the bolded lines, realize I wasn't just documenting her collapse, I was preventing her escape. Back home, I unpacked the suitcase while the kids watched cartoons. The house felt still again, but not the kind of quiet that follows rage. It was a held breath, the kind that comes just before a verdict. And I wasn't afraid of the judgment, because I wasn't hiding anything. But she was, and the walls were finally starting to close around her. Chris tried calling me the following Thursday. I watched the number buzz across my burner phone, the one linked to the decoy account Amy thought she created in my name. It rang 4 times, then flipped to voicemail. My voice on the line, flat and unmistakable. Next attempt, court. He didn't try again. Instead, I redirected that number to an automated text bot that would respond with preset legal warnings. I wasn't bluffing. I just preferred my messages in writing. Traceable, admissible. 10 minutes later, a reply from him pinged through. We need to talk. This is all going too far. I screenshotted it, saved it, then forwarded the entire exchange, along with the audio clip from his office and the chat logs, to his managing broker. The subject line was short: breach of client trust, audio enclosed. That same afternoon, I watched his LinkedIn page go dark. The company scrubbed him within 48 hours. His name removed from listings, his photo deleted, another empty profile in a system that had no loyalty to ghosts. Meanwhile, I was already 10 moves ahead. I had filed a petition for full financial custody of our children, not just physical. The motion included risk assessments, flagged loan activity, and evidence of ongoing digital fraud. Every page was wrapped in timestamps and verification records, signed by the financial investigator I hired under my friend's firm. Amy never saw the forms, but the family court did. At the same time, I booked a high-end hotel room under her name, paid up front, using her card. It wasn't theft, it was exposure. The bank flagged the transaction immediately, and within 6 hours she got the call. That's when the first crack finally showed. She texted me 5 times in a row that evening, each one shorter than the last. Call me. Now. I don't understand. You're making this worse. All your moves are now my trump cards. That last one. I read it twice, then laughed, because it wasn't a threat. It was a confession. She still believed this was a game, that somewhere inside this maze there was still a rule she could bend, a corner she could cut, a card she could play that would flip the whole board. But there was nothing left to flip. That night I met with my attorney and handed her the full package. Physical evidence, timelines, the digital correspondence, and the statement from my network contact verifying Chris's employment records and real estate violations. I want full account authority, I told her, sliding over the documents. Custodial and protective. She flipped through the dossier, her eyes widening in places. You built this like a prosecutor, she said. It's airtight. I didn't respond. I was past the need for praise. This wasn't revenge. It was preservation. 3 days later, I filed for a secondary restraining order. Not against her body, but her access. Specifically, no entry within 250 feet of the children's school, daycare, or transportation. The judge approved it in the interim, citing financial instability and evidence of malicious strategic deception. That morning, I scanned the signed order and emailed it to her work address. It was flagged urgent. I didn't need to wait for a reaction. I could already see it brewing, in her silence, in her absence from the house, in the way she avoided the cameras now positioned just above the garage door. She still came home at night, but later, slower. Her keys jingled louder, her footsteps hesitant. She had begun searching for gaps in the system. She didn't know the system was me. Later that week, I checked the surveillance logs. She'd entered the office twice while I was gone. Once to try the safe, once to search the drawers. Both attempts failed. I watched her give up on the last one, slumping into the desk chair like a storybook villain forced to read the ending they didn't write. She knew something had changed. She just didn't know how much. At work, I received an anonymous call from her colleague. Not a friend, just someone who had overheard her in the break room. She said you're trying to ruin her, the voice said, that you've frozen everything. I smiled. That's interesting, because I haven't touched a thing she didn't try to sell first. They didn't respond, just hung up. That night, I got an email alert from the school. Someone tried to access the children's pickup authorization page. The IP address matched one she'd used previously. The request was denied. The next day, I called the principal and submitted the restraining order in person. You did the right thing, he said. I already knew that. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I was just trying to make sure she couldn't lose in silence. That weekend, I updated every password. I shut down the old Wi-Fi network and opened a new line under a secure business license. The kids asked where Mom was. I told them she was away on a long project. They didn't ask more. They were sleeping better now. So was I. Amy didn't file a rebuttal. Not at first. She waited, like maybe time would undo the paperwork, soften the evidence, melt the verdict into something less humiliating. But time doesn't care who you used to be, and neither did the law. By the time she finally submitted her appeal, the freeze on her assets was already live. Her joint accounts suspended, all known logins voided. I'd filed the report to the state's fraud division a full week earlier, and the moment it cleared, her financial footprint turned into a red flag across every major institution. Within days, her access to banking, credit lines, and property management systems blinked out like lights on a failed grid. Still, she tried to fight it. Tried calling the bank. Tried leveraging her title at work. But her HR department had already received the anonymous file, the chat logs, the forged forms, and the signature scan that proved she faked my name on the Florida loan. The ethics board launched a probe. She was placed on indefinite suspension. By the second week, her office badge stopped working. I didn't know where she went after that, but I found out soon enough. A friend of mine in public records, someone who owed me a favor from a past deal, forwarded the latest update. Amy, recently removed from her parents' estate plan. It was quiet, private, just a line in a legal document that meant she no longer had a stake in the house, the trust, or the future she assumed was waiting. Her sister blocked her online. Her mother stopped replying to her emails. And her father, the same man who once toasted her as the smartest woman in the family, never returned her last call. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just printed the update and filed it in the drawer marked finalization. In court, I wore a navy jacket and a neutral face. My lawyer presented the timeline, the evidence, the impact statements. She played 2 of the audio files, one where Amy laughed with Chris about milking the mortgage, and another where she said, "I'll take whatever he has left." Those weren't hearsay. They were intent. The judge signed the restraining order that afternoon. It was longer than expected, tighter, permanent. She tried to look shocked, tried to cry, but the tears came too late for sympathy. A week later, I got a quiet message from a contact in risk management. Her name had been flagged across multiple bank compliance systems. No approval for loans, lines of credit, or joint property. Her profile had been blacklisted. Then one of the cameras caught her packing up at 3:47 a.m. She carried 3 bags and nothing else. I watched from my office as she walked down the driveway and got into a waiting Uber. No hugs, no words. She didn't even try the door. I didn't chase her. That was never the plan. Through a former colleague, I later found out she'd checked into a small roadside motel outside of town. A week after that, she submitted a failed immigration application. Destination? Canada. It was flagged and delayed. I had already submitted the full dossier to the immigration authorities. Identity fraud, financial manipulation, pending civil charges, all outlined, stamped, and attached. Then she tried to change her name, filed the paperwork under domestic privacy protections. I intercepted it through the court. The process was blocked before it started. Her name and everything tied to it stayed exactly where it was. Last I heard, she tried reaching out through mutual friends, looking for her boys. For me, they didn't respond. They knew what she'd done. I had made sure of that. Not with stories, not with gossip, but with proof, documents, time logs, and the chat where she wrote, "He won't even see it coming." Well, I had. Months later, I packed the last box from our old home and handed the keys to a broker. The house sold above asking price. I wired the earnings into a trust for the boys and bought a modest place in Savannah, Georgia. Not for the views, not for the weather, for the quiet, the kind I'd earned. I opened a workshop there, furniture mostly, hardwood, honest work, the kind where you bleed into something and it doesn't lie to you. My hands were calloused again, my eyes less tired. I stopped checking the cameras, stopped watching the folders. I archived the drive. The kids enrolled at a school down the road. They made friends. They slept better. So did I. I met someone. Her name was Allison. She was soft-spoken, loved rainy mornings and building puzzles. She never asked about the past, just helped me build something new with both feet on the ground. One night she looked around my shop and asked, "Is this your piece?" I nodded. I didn't need to say more. Amy had once said she needed to feel free. Now she was. Free of me. Free of everything. And for the first time since the day I heard that name whispered in her sleep, I felt something I hadn't known in months. Safe, calm, and truly for the first time in a long time, loved. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.